Okay, I am back for video 2 on 4 May 2023 and taken from John chapter 11, and we're going to start off with verse 14. Remember, Jesus had been on the other side of the Jordan River, and he heard about Lazarus being sick, and he waited 2 days, and now he's decided to go see Lazarus now that Lazarus has died. He's going to be going to Bethany, which is just 2 miles away from Jerusalem. So he's right there where things can be dangerous. So John chapter 11, verse 17 says, "On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days." Now, in that day and time, they usually buried people that day. They wanted to get them in the ground before 24 hours was up. And so Lazarus has been in the tomb 4 days, which means he's been dead 4 days. Verse 18, Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. And so, as we said before, Bethany was really close to Jerusalem, and people that had known them from Jerusalem, Bethany is just a small town, but a lot of people from Jerusalem had come out to comfort Mary and Martha. Now, as we said, he's been buried for 4 days, but the grieving goes on, the grieving process. Verse 20 says, "When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home." Martha, we always see, is the active one, the one who is doing. And, we have that occasion where Martha is working around the house and Mary is sitting listening to Jesus. And Martha tries to get Jesus to get Mary to help her, but Jesus said, well, Mary has chosen the more important thing, and that is sitting and listening to Jesus. But so when she heard Jesus was coming, she didn't wait for him to get to the house. She ran out to meet him. Verse 21, "Lord," Martha said to Jesus, "if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask." It's plain here that Martha blames the death of her brother on Jesus. "Lord, if you had been here, our brother would not have died." But she's looking forward. She said, "Even now I know that God will do whatever you ask." And so Jesus answers her in verse 23, and he says to her, "Your brother will rise again." And Martha answered and said, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." This tells us what their beliefs were as Jews. They didn't have the same beliefs that the Sadducees had. The Sadducees, they didn't believe in the resurrection. They had more the same beliefs of the Pharisees, who did believe in the resurrection. Jesus believed in the resurrection. Martha believed in the resurrection. And so she said, "Yeah, I know he'll rise again, but it'll be on the last day. It'll be at the resurrection." And then Jesus says to her in verse 25, "I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live, even though he dies, and whoever lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" We have another "I am" statement of Jesus, where Jesus says, "I am the resurrection and the life." I think this is the 5th "I am" statement of Jesus. Jesus has said, "I'm the bread of life. I'm the light of the world." Jesus has said, "I am the door to the sheep pen, and I am the good shepherd." And now he says, I am the resurrection and the life. That's what he is. The I am part says that he's God, and he is the resurrection and the life. We know that the resurrection comes from him. We know that life comes from him. If original life came from him, then resurrected life comes from him as well. And Jesus said, if you believe in me, you'll live even though you die. Death isn't the end of it. He's going to demonstrate it with Lazarus, but he's really going to make a way with his resurrection that we're going to see later on. And he said, if you live and believe in me, you'll never die. Not spiritually. You may die physically, but even though you die, you will live. And he asked Mary, do you believe this? And in verse 27, she said, yes, Lord, I believe you're the Christ, the Son of God, who was to come into the world. Here is a confession of Jesus Christ as the Son of God, and Jesus as the Christ, Jesus as the Messiah, the one that they were all looking forward to. And really, this is what we asked people to say before we baptized them, that they believe Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. That they believe that. Verse 28. After she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. The teacher's here, she said, and is asking for you. When Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who had been with Mary in the house, comforting her, noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. So, Martha, after spending some time talking with Jesus, she runs home. And she comes up to Mary and she kind of pulls Mary aside and says, listen, the teacher's here. Jesus is here. He's finally come. There's all kinds of people there to comfort them. But now Jesus has come. And she says, he's asking for you. I've already been out to see him and talked to him, but he's asking for you. And so she got up quickly and she went. Now, it says that Jesus was still outside of the village, and when the people who were in the house comforting Mary saw her and saw how quickly she got up and left, they figured that she was going to go mourn at the grave. And so they got up to follow her to mourn with her at the grave. Well, verse 32, when Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you had been here, our brother would not have died. She says the same thing Martha did. Martha, the first thing out of her lips when she saw Jesus, Master, if you'd been here, our brother wouldn't have died. And Mary does the same thing. Lord, if you had been here, our brother would not have died. This tells me that they were talking. That's one of the things that they were sharing, that they believed that Jesus was at fault for the death of their brother. In verse 32, it says, when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Where have you laid him? He asked. Come and see, Lord, they replied. Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, see how he loved him. But some of them said, could not the one who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying? He saw her weeping. He saw the people who come with her weeping, and it said that he was moved in spirit and he was troubled. I don't think he was troubled at those people who were crying. I don't think he was troubled with Mary and Martha. I think Jesus was troubled and he was angry at death. He was angry at the devil. And so he asked them, where have you laid them? Where have you laid him? Where have you laid Lazarus? They said, come and see, Lord. And then Jesus started crying himself. The Jews saw that, saw Jesus crying, and they said, see how much he loved him? But others of them, just like Mary and Martha, said, could not the one who opened the eyes of the blind man kept this man from dying? It's another way of saying, if you had been here, Lazarus would not have died. They blamed Jesus for the death of Lazarus as well. Okay, I'm going to stop right there for our second video. Again, I would like for you to pick me a preaching point. Give me that preaching point. Give me about 3 sentences explaining that preaching point, what you would say about it. And send it to me in my inbox on WhatsApp. Thanks, and then I'll finish this up with a third video. But right now, I'm going to have to charge my phone because it is almost dead. God bless.